Welcome to the Baseball Together podcast with your hosts, Blackjack Brad and Briggy Blue Eyes. And now, Baseball Together. Baseball family, welcome to this week's episode of the Baseball Together podcast. We got an episode of Ball Talk here with you, or for you, I should say. We're with Kevin Reavy. He is an author and a lifelong Phillies fan, and we have a book to talk about that he wrote, co-authored, and we'll get into the whole thing. But first things first, Kevin, how are you?
Never better. Phillies are doing well. Could be doing better. We're never satisfied as Phillies fans. It's a roller coaster every time. Last year at this point, it was pretty easy. I think might have been right around the time they started to really take off. But, we could win 5 in a row, lose one, and it's the end of the world.
You lose your mind.
That one means about 12 losses are about to follow. So it's nerve-wracking. But it's good. Yeah. So far, so good.
I get it. That's awesome. I love Phillies.
I think it's the life of a baseball fan.
Well, that's true.
There's just too many games. I was telling my co-author, Jack, I've been telling him because, we have our books coming out around July, and it's a weird time to come out with a baseball book. And we're really counting on the Phillies being good because we have a feel-good Phillies book. And if the fans aren't feeling good, it's not a great match. So I told Jack, I said, I have to stop treating all 162 games like it's an Eagles game, like it's the end of the world. It's just too many games. I had my cholesterol and blood pressure checked about 5 months ago, and we're already at a bad baseline. So, from there, things can only get worse. So I need to just calm down. Things are good. And let me extrapolate real quick. I don't want to take over the podcast, but just as a point of reference for me, I'm not a gambler, but I like to hedge life when it comes to sports. So I bet against my team so that if they win, who cares? I lost a little bit of money. Not a big deal. If they lose, here's some money so you feel better. It's a win-win scenario. But
I am 100% on board with that. I've always said when the Mariners make it to the World Series, I'm putting everything I have against them because it's the only thing that'll make it better if they lose.
Here's the problem. The Eagles just won the Super Bowl, and they won a lot of games last year. And I got really stupid with a lot of bets, and I lost a decent amount of money. It still felt great, but mortgage was a little tough that month. I just stopped as a point of self-therapy. I stopped betting against the Phillies. But when I see, when they started out 6-0 yesterday, I was like, ooh, the odds are going to be great. I could throw $5 on the Rays right now and be sitting pretty if things turn around. So, I don't know. It's unhealthy. I'm an unhealthy fan, but I think it makes for entertaining, sports books and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
That's where we live. Yeah, we get that. All right, Kevin, really quick, we're going to talk about the book, but you got to get caught in a rundown. We got to ask you some questions. Are you ready for that?
I guess. Let's do it.
All right, man. First question, what is your quest?
What is my quest?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is. Quest. Daily, my quest is to not drink. And weekly, my quest is to drink at some point responsibly. I like to have a good time. I'm 41. Yeah. I drink and work and play responsibly. And I like to, I don't know. That's probably not a great quest, but that's my quest.
Dude, well, I think we've all been to the point where that is the quest.
try to live to the edge and not go over it.
Yeah.
There you
totally.
go. Yeah, that's a good way to phrase that. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, the hardest hitting question you're going to get all day. What is your favorite color?
Well, I used to say red, and now I don't like red at all, which is odd because I'm a Phillies fan. But you'll never see me wear a solid red Phillies hat. I usually wear the maroon, if that's what that color is. Green. Definitely green. Most Phillies hats I have are green. I got a couple Tug McGraw St. Patrick's Day jerseys, so green.
Nice.
That's
awesome.
Are your green ones? Are they are they Fanatics hats, or are they like Philly Fanatic hats?
No.
Or are they?
So I only buy like the fitted. What the hell is it called? The New Era cap. The
like the
fitted
5950.
So if I'm looking at your cap correctly, I don't know if I've never seen that one. I would wear that. That's a great one. But the Fanatic one they recently came out with, it didn't come out in the 5950. So couldn't get that one. I'm always on the lookout for new, interesting hats. But yeah, I mean, whatever I can find. There was a new St. Patrick's Day one they came out with this year that was awesome. Got a bunch of different shamrocks on it, but when you got it, it was so hard to see. So I love that hat, but you can't really see the shamrocks. They could have gotten a little bit more snazzy with it.
Yeah. So this is one of the, what was it? I can't remember, Brig. Is this like the club? I think this is a batting practice hat for this year.
It was a spring training batting practice hat.
Yeah, I don't know how I missed it. I should have been on top of that because that is a different material, I think, too. It's like a mesh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of it's like that faux mesh kind of thing that they do with the spring training hats. It's really comfortable. It's one of my favorite hats.
It probably
Brig gives me a hard time, but I love this hat.
Days. That's probably why I missed it. I try to keep on top of these things, but I've got a life.
Dude, I just looked up the Tug McGraw green Phillies jerseys, and those things are sweet.
It's great. I love it so much.
Yeah,
I wear it
I've never seen that.
Although I think mine, I don't want to put my dad on blast. He got that for me as a gift. If I know my dad, that came into a bar. Some guy got those from China that he charged my dad like $22 for. I don't think mine's authentic. The dimensions of this jersey does not make me think it's that authentic.
In no way licensed.
And I still like it. It's got all the tags, but it doesn't fit exactly the way you'd expect.
We have plenty of experience with those types of jerseys. All right, if the Phillies were an ice cream flavor, if the Phillies were a beverage, that's my question. What would they be?
Not an ice cream guy. I am a beverage guy.
Yeah, me too.
All right. The Phillies, all right, well, this is easy. Just to be, I guess, give a cheap plug. But, I wrote a book called Ring the Bell. There is a beer by Conshohocken Brewing called Ring the Bell. So I'd have to say beer. There's really nothing, I think, in my top 5 beers, somewhere in there is you get to the ballpark, you grab that first beer. That's the best. That's an easy one. Beer and baseball go together so easily. And specifically for the Phillies, Phillies fans lately are rowdy. They bring that Eagles energy to the stadium. And there's no more rowdy drink than beer. It's the fans of Philadelphia are pretty infamous for being drunks, and beer is largely responsible for that outcome.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay, so you're not an ice cream guy, but if baseball was a dessert, what would it be?
I have no sweet tooth. If baseball was a dessert. Well, let's see. You have to have a lot of it. I guess lately I've been doing my daughter. She's almost 2 years old. She loves cookies. She's big with Cookie Monster, and so I don't have much of a sweet tooth, but I'll allow myself maybe I'll grab a cookie for her, a cookie for me. That's one thing daily where I'm like, all right, that's not so bad for me. I can have a cookie 162 times a year, whereas football, 16 games, that's got to be something decadent, something special, a cake, if that makes sense.
It does. It does make sense. Okay, what is one unpopular baseball opinion that you have?
Oh, this is perfect because I don't want to say I'm known for it. I'm not exactly famous, but people that know me, my famous opinion on baseball is I simplify it to defense doesn't matter. And everyone says, well, of course it matters because there's been plenty of games this year the Phillies have blown plays defensively. But what I always like to say is, Mark Grace never brought his glove with him into the batter's box. Barry Bonds never brought his glove with him into the batter's box. I don't care what position you play when you're in the batter's box. It doesn't matter to me. If Mark Grace would have played second base, and by the way, I think, a lefty, I think it could totally be done. A little less so in the 80s and 90s than now. But if we're talking right now in baseball, I would love to see lefties playing non-lefty positions, because what's happening? We're seeing flyouts on the rise. We're seeing strikeouts through the roof. Mm-hmm. The second baseman is getting in. I don't remember this stat specifically. I looked up this stat about 2 years ago, and the opportunities for second basemen were cut in half from what they were, 25, 30 years ago. So when I say defense doesn't matter, I want to see more teams just put their best hitters in the lineup. Don't worry about defense so much. I think back on, you had the 98 season, Sammy Sosa killing it, 20 home runs in June, comes out of nowhere. You have the home run race, and everybody knows that. The Cubs had an opportunity to build on that team. And they had Mark Grace at first. That offseason, for the 99 upcoming season, you had, I believe, Mo Vaughn, Will Clark, and Rafael Palmeiro were all unrestricted free agents. They all played first base. You had to protect Sammy Sosa in that lineup. He didn't have a whole lot of protection. There was Henry Rodriguez, and he was nearing the end of his career. They didn't have a whole lot. And if they could have just moved Grace over to second base and then signed one of those sluggers, all of a sudden, that's a totally different team. You have protection for Sammy Sosa. Everything changes. But you got Mark Grace, who, only hits, 15 home runs a year, not a big slugger, but still a very important bat. And I just wonder, it's sad to me that, as a Phillies fan, I love Chase Utley, love Jimmy Rollins, but I don't think they should be in the Hall of Fame, because we're oddly categorizing players by position when, again, they don't bring their glove into the batter's box. Mm-hmm. I'd love to see a guy like Mark Grace in there. But just because he played first base, he's not a Hall of Famer. Doesn't make any sense to me. He was an incredibly valuable batter. And so, I'd like to simplify it to say defense doesn't matter, especially nowadays with the athletes you're seeing. Bryce Harper, he's a borderline Gold Glove defensive first baseman. Not so much this year, but he shows flashes. And he learned that in one offseason. This can be done. Yeah. It doesn't have to be that complicated. I think we should be seeing guys play any position, really. I mean, it's again, not to compare it to football again, but it's not such a specialty thing. These guys should be baseball players. Let's put the best batters in the lineup.
Well,
to be fair with Bryce Harper, I was going to say with Bryce Harper, he came up a catcher. Like, he was drafted as a catcher and then got moved to the outfield. So he's had the glove forever. So I think the transition to first base is easier for him than it would be for other guys. But also, that problem you talked about the Cubs had would have been easily solved had the National League had the DH.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Oh, yeah, and that's
right. So I think that solves a lot of the problems offensively that we've seen over the years. Like, well, it just doesn't work because we've got a guy in that spot, right? Like, well, we just bring another guy who can hit. That's all we got to do. Mm-hmm. And so I think you're right, though, because we see, like, last year the Mariners had the best pitching staff in baseball, one of the best defenses, but they just couldn't score runs. Right, that they were still there at the end of the year, but man, that offense just was lacking. I think you're onto something though. Defense doesn't matter a whole lot, because if you can score 7 runs a game, nobody's beating you.
Right.
And
again, if you have strikeouts,
but if you score 2 and you're giving up 3, which still is nothing, you're not winning a whole lot.
It used to be a different game, and it used to matter. Like the 1980 Phillies, they had Gold Glovers, up and down the lineup, and it was very important to their pitching staff and to their team overall. But guys weren't striking out nearly as much as they are now. So you have to adjust to what the game is today.
Yep.
Yeah, we agree. What I was going to say earlier was we've seen the best baseball players be able to shift positions. The most athletic guys fill in gaps as needed. And we just, we've been talking a lot about Pete Rose, and Pete Rose, eventually was moved all the way around. I think he played 5 positions. But Jazz Chisholm came in with the Yankees last year and jumped into third base just because that's where the hole was, and they wanted his lefty bat and they wanted his energy, so they got him there. Same with Mookie Betts. They're like, well, what can we put him here? Can we put him at shortstop? Can we put him at second base? Where can we keep him? And he is serviceable, if not spectacular, but he's serviceable in those areas because he's a fantastic athlete. So, yeah, maybe you're onto something there. I never considered that.
I don't know if I could get behind a lefty second baseman, though.
Well, no, seriously.
That's too hard for me to fathom.
Yeah.
Don Mattingly did it a bit. In my head, it works. As far as turning double plays, it gets a little tricky, but it does work. It can work.
It can work. Yeah, because
on the fact that, my plan would be I'm putting Mark Grace, who's just a great fielder. I'd be putting him, and I've been trying to reach out to him to ask him specifically, him or a guy like John Olerud.
Mm-hmm.
I think for sure they would say they could do it. They're going to, they have egos. They know what they were capable of doing. So they're going to say, yeah. But I really believe a guy who's just that great defensively, you can put him at second base, and whatever disadvantage that is overcome by the fact that he's a great defensive player, no matter where you put him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
I'm going to have to chew on that one some more.
Yeah, I want to chew on it too.
There's just so many mediocre players that I think get elevated by their position. And I've always thought it was strange that we group guys by their position. Take the game out of it, just how the Hall of Fame is stacked. And we just think, I just don't think Chase Utley should be in the Hall of Fame because you look at his numbers and it's just, they don't match up to a guy who played outfield just coincidentally. And it's like, really, Chase Utley
I feel like Utley's
they needed him.
I feel like Utley's offensive numbers, even like they're good. Like, don't get me wrong, I understand they're good, but even compared to like some elite second baseman, it's not there, And that's one of the, and again, getting caught up in the second baseman part of it. Everybody hits, but yeah, the roster is built differently now. You've got guys up top to bottom who can hit for power. Everybody can hit for power for now, and it's no longer is it, well, this position's on a power position, so we're going to give him a pass.
Yeah, true.
Right, so.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
So you're spot on with that part of it. All right, should we get into the book, Brig?
Let's talk about the book. So Kevin here wrote a book. This is your third book? Second or third book?
Technically fourth, because we did two. I started with This Day in Philadelphia Sports. I didn't even realize I had it on hand, but
nice.
I'm in my basement and I got a whole bunch of stuff. That was my first book, and then Incredible Baseball Stats was my second. And we did an updated version of that, which was like damn near 100% new material. So that was considered the third book. So
I gotcha. Yeah, I was looking at it, and I saw two versions of that and thought it had been duplicated on Goodreads or something like that. But you're saying it's a full revamp.
What we learned, we had all new information. But then with baseball, you go through one season. And our last update on that was 2019, which is now shockingly a long time ago. You go through one season and everything changes. I mean, it's true. We're talking about Rhys Hoskins forever being the leader of the Phillies in that book. He's our guy. And then, Bryce Harper, not even mentioned because he's not on the radar yet in 2019. Right. So everything changes in 1 year. I think our next update, we're going to dig more into the history of baseball. It stays a little longer because, not to get too personal, but I'm sitting on like 400 of these damn books in my basement. Sometimes I'm literally sitting on these books. And I don't really want to even sell them. I feel bad because there's some good historical facts. But again, like the updated information, the new stuff is just way not new anymore. So, not to go on another tangent, but there you go.
I got 400 copies of my book sitting here too.
Yeah, and we had Tony Barnett on. He was like, I got books here, I got them coming out of my ears everywhere.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Okay, so with this book then, less is able to change because you're talking, so the subtitle, let me just read it off for everybody. It's called Ring the Bell, and it's how the Philadelphia Phillies built baseball's best fan base. That's a lot of alliteration in there, Kevin. That's a lot. I like it.
Well, again, funny story. I just emailed the publisher saying, what's our subtitle? Because if you go on Amazon right now, I think it's the moments that made Philadelphia Phillies fans. So I have to check my emails today, but I'm not sure what the subtitle is even going to be. So we have to figure that one out.
All right. Okay, so either way, we're taking a fan's perspective and we're talking about it from like the fan experience, right? That's the thrust. Tell us.
Well, it's a little complicated. The main thing is we start with 1964 because we didn't really want to dig back too deep into the Phillies history because we wanted to focus on people that are still alive, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So there's plenty of people still alive that remember that team, that kind of made them Phillies fans. Ray Didinger, great Philadelphia sports writer, a legend. That's the 64 season is what kind of made him a Philadelphia sports fan, or really what made him a crazy Philadelphia sports fan. So we wanted to start, we wanted to tell like the origin stories, like of the Philadelphia Phillies fan, young and old. So here's what happened in the history of the team that you might remember, or your dad or grandfather might remember, no matter what generation you are. We just didn't want to go back to 1950 with the Phillies and their World Series. Good for them, but there's no connection there. We wanted to try to tell stories that connect with the things you remember, or that somebody in your family might remember. So it's kind of like a nostalgia book. It's a little bit of an encyclopedia, but we had fun with it. It's light. It's mostly optimistic, but again, we start with 1964, which was their, famous collapse. We start with the bad times, and then we just go through it. And that's being a Philadelphia Phillies fan. You go through the ringer, and we try to tell those kind of stories. There is a chapter where we literally talk about the fans, and we list every fan group that's ever been made, large or small. There's a great Philadelphia sports historian, Matt Albertson. He helped big time with that. He's been, if you Google him, he's been compiling a list of every single fan group that's ever been made, starting way back when. And I remember growing up with the Schillometer for Kurt Schilling, and obviously the Randy Wolfpack and all that. So we do have a chapter specifically dedicated to the fans, but mostly it's a story about what the players' moments and history did to make you a Philadelphia Phillies fan.
That's a really cool perspective. We talk about the nature of fandom a lot between Brad and I, and we talk about it on the show a little bit, but what is it, in your opinion, that if you were to distill the essence of being a fan down, what is that? And then why are we so driven by it? What is it that causes so much passion to the point of vitriol with people who are not fans of our team, and then this brotherly, familial relationship with people who are, despite both of them being perfect strangers? Like, what is it, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, it's exactly that. I would think of it as like a brotherly, familial thing. These teams are an extension of your family for the most part. So you're going to go through the ups and downs. And I think the more you experience ups and downs, the more full your character is as a fan. I think the first team that comes to my mind, well, I'll give you two teams that come to mind. On the happy side, you have the Braves. All they do is win. We specifically mention that in the book. I think it might be in the introduction. It's like we joke around saying, you can take a phone call at any Braves game because everyone's just there. They're not super into it. Braves always win, whatever. It's good to have a nice night out on the town. Can't always do that at Phillies games. It gets too loud, it gets too rowdy. The other side of that is the Pirates, who've been terrible for so long that going to a game is just this odd, once-in-a-while experience to go check out the cool stadium, to take your young kids to just, experience a big league ballpark. But you're not really invested fully. And part of that, you have to have the good with the bad. And the Phillies have just had enough good at the right times that it's a really full experience for a fan. They haven't had a whole lot of down times where it just completely shuts the franchise down entirely. I think that's what happened a little bit with the Pirates. That's where they're in kind of a rut right now. And, with the Rays and teams like that.
The Athletics especially, too.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe the Rays are a bad example, but there's no foundation for the Rays. They started, in 98. You have to have some sort of foundation of a fan base that, lives and dies over a very long period of time. The Phillies going back to 1883. It's all part of it. It's all in the sauce.
It is in the sauce, yeah.
I was actually going to bring that up. I like that you bring back the Phillies go back to the 1800s, because as somebody of a fan, or as somebody who's a fan of a team that has been around for 50 years, something like that, the Mariners have been around, the idea of writing a book about the Phillies to me would seem super daunting. But I love that you were like, let's go back to where people are still alive can remember.
Yeah, there's no rules.
Yeah,
exactly. That's what we talked about. There are actually no rules. We can write about whatever we want, however we want. And we were going to have the second chapter be kind of like, all right, we'll start with 64. We'll start with the bad times. But we're going to give a quick recap of what happened before then. And then we just decided, nah, we're not going to do that. There's no reason to. We'll touch on the old stuff just as a quick, aside here and there, so you have the knowledge that it goes back to 1883. But yeah, I mean, there is a Philadelphia Phillies encyclopedia. It weighs 27 pounds. It's 7,000 pages long. It's wildly huge. It's very accurate. It's exceptionally dull. It's very informative. Dull as hell. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that exists. We wanted this to be more modern, a little bit more fun. That's what we were going for.
Yeah, in reading through it, I was struck by the conversational tone. It kind of reads like two dudes shooting the bull, talking about their favorite team, or a father-son, or a mother-family dinner table kind of a conversation at some points where you're like, it's kind of like I remember when,
Yeah, and that's how people talk about teams and how they talk about what they remember from different teams. I was born in 83. My team was the 93 Phillies. I was 9 years old when that season started. And there's so many fun things. I could go through the stats and all, the boring stuff, this and that, but it's the characters that I remember, the way the players interacted, the shocking amount of mullets on that team, and the hard rock kind of energy. That was so cool. I remember John Kruk, besides my own mediocrity in baseball, John Kruk ruined my professional baseball career because I saw him. All I needed was an excuse to not work out, to not work hard. And I saw John Kruk, and it's it's anybody can do this. But that's it was so wild. The last thing you would talk about is, what Terry Mulholland's record was, or ERA. You talk about the insane personalities. Mitch Williams being, it's not been confirmed, but most people suspect he's the inspiration for Rick Wild Thing Vaughn.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And, we talk about in the book, we make specific, connections between players on that team and guys in the major league movies. Because that's what they were. They were fun. They were fun dudes first, and that makes for a great story. And I think that's the way you talk about those teams when you're just sitting in the man cave or wherever at the bar talking about teams of the past.
Yeah, I agree.
And to that,
do you have? Go ahead.
Real quick. Sorry, thoughts pop in my head. We have a chapter on the 83 Phillies. Nobody cares about the 83 Phillies. Really. Nobody has memories from that team. Half the team was cast-offs from the Reds that, were getting too old and they could no longer afford. There's no real connection to that team because they just won in 80. They were kind of lucky to get there in 83. It was an aging team. Things were going a different direction. So we're they went to the World Series. It's kind of a big deal. We should cover it. And I just said, let's just use as few words as possible and acknowledge that, we don't have to be a real encyclopedia. We could have some fun with it. So it's something like they scored 671 runs that season. I'm like, well, let's cover this chapter in 671 words, and we'll say that from the top.
Yes.
And like the very last thing is like that season, the Orioles scored X amount of runs, and the Phillies scored 671. So the very last word too is 671, and I like how it all like comes together. And if you have a problem with that, like if the '83 Phillies were your team, then you're weird and you're boring and you're not going to connect with this book. There's
right.
no way anybody's going to have a problem with that, but we covered it in a fun way, at least. Like it's fun to say that the '83 Phillies just didn't matter. So
it's true because I'm looking at it, and if you were to lay it out without any of these paragraph breaks or the footnotes or anything like that, it would probably be just over 2 pages, like 2 printed pages. You've stretched
696 runs that season
with formatting.
Okay. And here's what's and like not to get too, I guess inside baseball is the right term. But the publisher comes back to me and it's like, so with like different changes, it's going to be just over or under that amount of runs. And I was like, well, that kind of ruins the joke. You're going to need to finish on that. But also I thought, who's counting?
Right.
I mean, I don't know. It's going to be around there, and we'll just say it is. So
just say
that's perfect.
I like that. Yeah. So for those listening who don't know, that was a negative 2.1 WAR Pete Rose. Joe Morgan still getting it, 3.2 WAR. You had Mike Schmidt ripping it up at 6.9, but Bo Diaz was the catcher. Ivan De Jesus was the shortstop, and then Gary Maddox and Vaughn Hayes both had negative WAR in the outfield that season. That's interesting that team was able to put together.
It's just once you go through it, and a lot of those guys that mattered, they were on the 80 team, and once you go through it and you talk about the 80 team, to then talk about 83 is like, I'm sure it mattered at the time, but if you don't pull it off, it's just like, all right, we covered these bases with 80, let's move on. And then we basically just fast forward right to 93 for the most part.
Yeah, and that's awesome. Rightly so. And you do. It is the next chapter is 93. Sorry, I'm looking specifically as we're going, but that's really funny because I feel like Mike Schmidt specifically gets lots of play in Philly fandom, right? So to have just bounced off him with that 93 season, or 83 rather.
The 83?
Yeah, like that's just interesting. I just think I love the way you've handled it, honestly. Because you're like, we don't care. We don't have to care. But here's a fist bump, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah. And we made a lot of choices, maybe not like traditional choices with the book. At the end of the day, we're just like, all right, let's do our best. Here's the idea that we have. Here's what we want to accomplish with it. Mostly have fun. There was a part at the end of the book where we do lists, and we were going to list, our favorite starting 9. And then we had our least favorite starting 9. And I just thought, like, I don't want to end on a negative note. And we're not trying to tear anyone down. Even with guys that maybe in Phillies history deserve to get torn down. Mm-hmm. We very casually mentioned some things. I'm not going to get into names. Don't want to get into it. But we all know guys in Phillies history that maybe weren't always the best dudes. And it's okay. We're focusing on the positive for the most part. And that's pretty much how we dealt with the whole book. Like, let's have fun. Let's be loose. Let's be informative and, do our best. But, we don't have to be bogged down by rules. At the end of the day, you either dig it or you don't. We hope it's more in the dig side. So
yeah, man.
We'll see. Time will tell.
I love it.
Okay, so there's a chapter about the pursuit of Bryce Harper. Tell us a little bit about what that was like, because I'm a Bryce Harper fan, so I was paying close attention. Like, I was like, there's no way he goes back to the Nats. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Philly makes sense. Chicago makes sense. I would love him in Seattle, but that's not going to happen because they're not going to spend that kind of money, right? Like, what was that like for you as a fan? Can you take us through that a little bit?
Yeah, what's great, and why it's awesome that me and Jack wrote the book is, again, we're about 10 years apart in age, so kind of like a different generation, a different perspective. Kind of like my Bryce Harper guy was more Jim Thome. I think I was like a freshman in college. And so that was kind of so Jack's Jim Thome would be Bryce Harper, and we cover the book that way. I do the first half of the book, Jack does the second, because it's more in our wheelhouse to do it that way. What we specifically remember, what we're closer to. So for me, I immediately thought Bryce Harper. All right, this is going to be our Jim Thome. This is a guy that changes the culture, changes the atmosphere, and that was huge. Nobody talks about it much because Thome was at a time when the Phillies, they didn't make the playoffs, so they didn't make the postseason. And it wasn't, if you don't make the postseason, again, not much to talk about. But considering the Phillies were in a big-time lull at that time, things were at least exciting. And they were moving into a new stadium, and everything was, starting to come up a little bit. And kind of the same story with Bryce Harper, except they put a little bit of a better team or a little bit more effort into putting a better team behind him with the knowledge of the past. Let's not do what we did with Thome and do halfway measures. Once they got Harper, they made big moves after that. There was, it seemed that they were interested in spending money and doing things the right way. And, Kyle Schwarber, JT Realmuto, tons of guys. Andrew McCutchen made a big difference in the clubhouse as far as atmosphere. Great teammate and produced not terribly. So what it was like with Harper was like, we need somebody. We need a guy that's going to change the atmosphere. And I don't know why I'm blanking on his name right now, but the other free agent that offseason, he went to the Padres. Help me out here.
Manny Machado.
Yeah. Completely blanked out on his name. It was between those two guys. And I just thought to myself, all right, well, Manny's not a superstar like Harper is. Just because, Harper was a superstar from a teenager. So I thought, even if you think Manny's going to have better numbers, we need the superstar. We need the front-facing guy for the franchise. And, everything worked out great. It's probably better than we could have anticipated. No World Series win yet, but, at the end of the book, when we list out our favorite players and, make all the lists, our Rushmore, we have Bryce Harper as one of the 4 guys. So it hasn't been that long, but he's made a huge impact, and we'll see where it ends up. But I think anymore in any sport, you need that guy. And we didn't have him yet. And it's so important. It might cost a ton of money, but your whole franchise is on the line unless you get that guy. So it was huge, and it took forever. It annoys me with baseball offseason. Things don't move very quickly. It can go down to the very last minute. It did with Harper. And one of the things Jack did online, he's huge in baseball, Twitter and all that. He had, I think he called it Harper Lent. So he just, it was hugely important to him that, I'm going to sacrifice things in life, in the pursuit of, he considered himself part of the pursuit of Bryce Harper. And he'd probably get mad at me for saying he was that important to the process, but as fans, we all do what we can. As gamblers, sometimes we think, if I move off this chair, it's going to affect the outcome of the game. So
I was going to say, you're talking to two guys who are firm believers in rally position. So we get it.
There was a no-no going on against my team last night. I texted everybody. I'm like, there's a no-no, go and tell all your friends. There's a no-no. And then, boom, it was broken up. And I'm like, I got the mojo, JoJo. That is mine.
I feel like now, sometimes when things go so long, there's a no-hitter going, you can't talk about it. That's been the trend for so long. I think the new thing is to talk about it immediately. So whenever it's the 4th inning, no hits, I'm talking about it. That's the thing. If I don't talk about it, that's going to be the thing that breaks up the no-hitter.
Yeah. I heard a story, it was last week or 2 weeks ago. There was a reliever who, out in the bullpen, every single game, he'd be like, 1 hit, one inning, no hitter, 2 innings, no hitter, 3 innings, no hitter. Every inning he would check in.
Yeah.
Until it was broken up.
Loser.
That's a little obnoxious, but I get it. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, last question I have for you, and then we'll wrap it up. When Mike Trout came available as a free agent, and everybody was talking about.
Hold on, Brig. He signed an extension, but he was going to. Okay, go ahead.
There you go. Because of his relationship with Brother Harper, which is what we call him, Brother Harper, he ended up being the talk of the town as potentially moving to Philly. We even did hats in this color that said Philly Harper in that year, kind of like a campaign T-shirt for the presidency, right? What was the vibe in Philly and in Philly fandom about the potential of bringing over Mike Trout?
I think it was actually more realistic and rational, which is like an odd way to describe a Phillies fan, because he's been talked about. I go to as many Eagles games as I can. Trout goes to as many Eagles games as he can. You always see him on, the big screen Jumbotron thing. And, he's a gigantic Philadelphia sports fan. But that's at odds with his personality on the baseball field. And as it pertains to baseball specifically, he's a guy I don't think that wants the spotlight all that much. I don't think he wants to be in Philadelphia to play. I think he wants to be in Philadelphia to cheer on the Eagles. And so that always being at odds, I think Phillies fans, for the most part, understood that. And it's always talked about. I mean, I talked about it, this past offseason. I thought it would be interesting to bring him in. I don't love it now. You're looking at his trajectory and you start to think maybe the player he is right now is the player he's going to be. I still had a little bit of optimism with him this past offseason. And you can look at him and say, all right, these injuries have been fluky as hell. And it might be a situation where you can you got to spend a lot of money, but you can oddly buy low. You might be able to trade for him and not have to give up all that much. Because I don't think the Angels are all that interested in paying him what they're going to have to pay him if he's going to be this kind of player. And then you wonder, if you bring him to Philadelphia, is he motivated? Does that change the kind of player he is? You put him on that kind of team with the firepower it has. Does that make him better? Does that, kind of rewind the clock on him as a player a little bit and make him the player he used to be, if only for one season? I don't know. But I felt like I was on an island with that opinion for the most part. Most people just, I guess maybe they got a little tired of talking about Mike Trout the past 10 years, joining the Phillies. It's all anybody wanted to see for the longest time. And after it becomes clear it's just probably not going to happen, and especially now that it's like, if it did, is he that great? Is he going to be that big of a difference? It just never really got to the point where it was all that important. I think if there was a real opportunity and he was still a great player, I think the Phillies fans would just will it to happen. It would just be one of those things, all right, they'll just pay him, they'll make it happen. Because, that's one thing, like, fans do have that kind of power. You can will these kind of things to happen, especially in a sport like baseball where there's no salary cap. Like, they can do it. Mm-hmm. One example that comes to mind, I guess it would be 2002 offseason, 2003 offseason for the Eagles. It was so clear after they lost in the playoffs to the Panthers that, okay, enough playing around. Andy Reid needs a wide receiver. And it's all anybody talked about. And you can't tell me that the fans didn't have something to say in them going after Terrell Owens. Because they needed a guy now. Now it's clear this is only hurting you. And they get that guy and they turn into, a Super Bowl team. So the fans have a say in these kinds of things. And I think they were rational and just Trout, cool idea 6 years ago. But right now.
Right. I think at the time it was a perfect fit, but now it's not going to work for anybody because he's got that lingering knee, and I don't think it's going to go away. I think it's just who he's going to be for the rest of his career, however long that might be.
If you could tell me, and both teams were motivated to make a deal. If you told me that, okay, he's going to do whatever it takes, get injections, he's going to give us 1 year, and it's going to be 1 year of great baseball, and maybe his body explodes in the offseason because of that.
Right.
I think they do it. All it takes is 1 year sometimes. Not to keep going back to football, but Saquon Barkley proves that sometimes, you just go for it for 1 year and then see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're right. And he could DH the whole time and be a contributor. Easy.
Yeah, right. And he doesn't have to be a hero.
Right.
Yeah.
I think in that kind of lineup, our stars are getting older. Real Muto isn't the guy he used to be. But, you could put him on that team. All eyes don't have to be on Trout.
Right. Exactly. Well, we got to get rolling. Got to get out of here. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, the book is Ring the Bell. I guess the subtitle is yet to be determined.
Yeah.
We'll get there. But the book comes out.
Silly
What?
that I had to send an email to say, by the way, what's the title of our book?
Yeah.
That's kind of the vibe. I don't want to give off the impression that we just wrote this book willy-nilly. We worked extremely hard. And Jack, we were both brand new fathers when we started this, and we worked our tails off to get this thing done and to get it just right, exactly the way we wanted. But it is funny, it's one of those things where it's well, that's perfect. That we don't even know yet what the title's gonna be, but we're working on it. And I can check back in. All I know is I'm gonna work on a quest first. I'm gonna try to have a quest today, so that if I do come back, I'll fill you in. I kind of like the question. I never thought about life in terms of quests, but I'm going to get on that.
Well, we'll have to have you back on for sure. We'll get to update on the book and the quest.
It's been a fun conversation. Thanks, guys.
Good, yeah.
Love it. Thanks. All right, baseball family, we will be right back. Reinstated. Yeah. Ship. All right, I'll take us out.
Okay, thanks.
Baseball family, thank you so much for joining us for that conversation with Kevin Reavy. That was a ton of fun. I'm excited for that book.
Me too. Yeah, it's going to be great.
I have a PDF copy, but I'm probably going to buy an actual copy, a physical copy, because it's going to be really good. It's a lot of fun. And I will tell you, the tone is not like what you would get from most other nonfiction baseball books. Very conversational, very relaxed. Yeah. They whine at you a little bit sometimes, and it's funny. Yeah. It's good.
But that's what it should be.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic, and I love everything about it. So highly recommend it. There is going to be a link in the description, I believe, because I think you can pre-order. So we'll have it down there. You can go check it out. But baseball family, don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, and review everywhere that you can. If you're on YouTube right now and you have not subscribed, go ahead and do that now. And hit the like button because that helps out a ton as well. And baseball family, again, thank you so much. We will catch you next week.
But